Hello everyone, Kevin Fernando here, GP partner at North Berwick Health Centre and one of the Goggledocs. If you've not met us before, Goggledocs, we have four docs, UK based. We have a passion for all things cardio-renal metabolic. So I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Patrick Holmes. I'm a GP in the Darlington area.
And I'm Amal Patana, a consultant diabetologist and in general medicine in the West Midlands.
And today we're missing Amrit Lamba, who is a GP with a specialist interest in diabetes in London. So a slightly different take today. We're delighted to be joined today by David Strain, honorary senior lecturer, consultant diabetologist with an interest in older people's medicine, but also has been working very much in the field of COVID since over the last couple of years, and in particular has been part of the long COVID task force as well. So thanks for joining us, David. Very much appreciated. So towards the end of last week, the whole COVID landscape changed quite abruptly, didn't it, with the emergence of this new variant, which has now been named Omicron. So how worried should we be, David?
Well, it's important. So, firstly, thanks for allowing me to introduce this. It's great to be on this side of the Goggledocs that I've been watching for quite some time now. The Omicron does pose the first real threat that we've had to the program since the original outbreak. Alpha, Delta variants, the Beta and the Gamma that never really touched our shores were more incremental steps. There were two, maybe three different mutations. The Alpha variant carried two mutations on the baseline. The Delta variant carried six mutations on the base. The Omicron's got at least 50 mutations. It's got 32 different mutations just within the spike protein and 10 mutations within that receptor binding domain. So these are terms that, to be honest, most of us had forgotten about after our exams, but we've now become very familiar with these. The receptor binding domain is what makes this far more infectious. It sticks to our ACE2 enzymes really, really closely. The spike protein is a bit that we're producing antibodies to when we have our vaccines or when we've had previous infections. And the change in morphology there means that the antibodies that we've already got, whether that be from vaccination or whether it be from natural infection, may, and I'm stressing may, not be as effective as they were. We've seen in South Africa, well, it first described in Botswana on the 11th of November, and this has progressed at a tremendous rate. It's gone from being 3 or 4 isolated cases on the 11th of November to nearly 35% of all of the cases in the Johannesburg and Pretoria region in just 3 weeks. Put that into context, it took 4 months for the Delta virus to become the dominant strain. Within 3 weeks, this has taken over. So actually, this is a game changer in the COVID virus. And there is a real possibility this could be putting us back to square one.
Now, David, one thing I want to ask that you mentioned that is that how much of that rise is related to the infectivity of this new variant versus the vaccine evasion or despite vaccinations, how much of that is vaccination in South Africa, for example, is that linked or related, or is that just something different?
So it's very difficult to say this at the moment. Got to remember, South Africa's got a very different demographics to we have here. There's only about 26% of the population in South Africa has actually received the primary course of vaccination, let alone the boosters that we're all on. The worrying bit from this comes from the spread when it was in Hong Kong. It spread in double vaccinated people in the quarantine hotel, and it apparently jumped from one room to another room, making the assumption that there was no corridor parties taking place. That's a real concern that this could have been spreading in air conditioning within a hotel. It's also been found within Israel, which is actually well known for being the best vaccinated population in the country, in the world rather. The Israeli population, they got their double vaccination in early. They got ahead of us with the booster vaccination. They started around a month ahead of us and are the only country in the world that's further ahead than we are on the booster program. And yet this is still entering there. we're only really over the next few weeks going to find out what the impact. I mean, I know there's so far been 3 cases identified in the UK, all of which related to spread to travel rather to South Africa. What we need to see over the next few weeks is if this does spread, and if it is spreading, how quickly is it spreading through the vaccinated and the unvaccinated? Is it actually being picked up with 32 different mutations in the spike protein alone? It's entirely possible that some of the lateral flow tests will miss it, as some of the lateral flow tests that we had back in January were missing the alpha variant, which is how it spread from Kent so quickly. It could be, and I'm stressing this is worst case scenario, it could be that the tests that we're all doing to try and identify this early, those lateral flow tests, may not even be picking it up, and that would be a true game changer for the pandemic.
One thing which, as we've seen over the last few weeks and months, is how younger people, particularly school-aged children, have been driving the Delta wave in the UK. From what you're telling me, this new variant is actually going to be at least as infectious and with a sticky spike protein as the Delta variant. So are we going to, because we've only got low levels of vaccination in children in this country, so are we going to see a huge uptick if this gets into that school-age population? Are we going to see closing of schools, etc., lockdowns arising?
So there's 2 different questions there, Patrick. Firstly, it's about the vaccination and if the vaccine, how effective is the vaccine going to be against this variant? And then the other is there's children. Now, I'm saying this knowing that I have children of my own, but those bioterrorists that are truly driving the viral reservoir that we're facing at the moment, over half of the new cases that we've seen in the last few months ahead of this variant have been in children, school-age children or primary school age are driving it at the moment. They form a viral reservoir, they catch COVID, but they don't get sick from it. But the problem then comes as our vaccine efficacy starts to wane, then we end up with the cases are spread from children to their parents and grandparents. And that was always going to be one of the big worries around Christmas when children get it in primary school or secondary school. Then we have the big family get togethers and then it spreads further. So that's one element of it. And we are getting up to speed. We're catching up to the States in our secondary school vaccination program. We're a long way behind with primary school. We're still in the evaluating the evidence there. And that's a really tough discussion and probably something for another day. But the question then comes about whether the Omicron variant is going to be vaccine escape. We know that the Pfizer, the AstraZeneca, and the Moderna vaccines, the 3 that are most in circulation at the moment, produce a vaccine soup. We know against every other variant that there's been so far, at least 2 of the antibodies that you produce 13 different antibodies to Pfizer, 15 different antibodies to Moderna. At least 2 have been preserved in every single version of the virus. And 2 is all it takes. If 2 antibodies can then stimulate the beta cell response and also stimulate the T cell response, and then you get the good innate immunity as well as that antibody-driven effect, then actually the drop in efficacy of the vaccine rather, will only be minor. For example, we saw when we went from the wild type to the Delta variant, we went from 13 antibodies down to only 7 antibodies that were fully effective against the Delta. But that almost halving in number of antibodies translated to a very small 3% reduction in efficacy. Even if we've only got 2 or 3 antibodies that are maintained across the board, that gives us hope that the vaccine program we've already had will be almost as effective. And as long as we keep rolling out our booster program and consider vaccinating the children, then we should be in a pretty good position going forward. However, if it goes the other way, and if the vaccine efficacy drops to as low as 30%, as some of the estimates I've seen coming out suggest, then actually we are looking at how quick can a new vaccine be developed and how quickly can we implement a rollout of an Omicron specific booster. When it comes to the mRNA vaccines, we know it takes them about 60 to 70 days once they have the code. Getting the full code is going to take about 20 days, which means in about 3 months' time, we could potentially have an Omicron specific booster. But that's going to be a very long 3 months if we have to wait that long, though.
I suppose the $64,000 question is, could this have been prevented? Taking a bigger look at the picture, as long as we have such disparities in vaccination programs across the world and all the health inequalities, is this not an inevitability, these new variants, David?
Yeah, that's a big thing. And with my BMA hat on, we've actually been discussing this a lot about whether we should be trying to get more vaccines out to Africa and East Asia and the countries that don't have it. But actually, I don't think vaccination would have prevented this. This has only been formed because one particular individual will have been carrying the virus enough to make many mutations. Remember, every time you copy the virus, it's like hand transcribing the Bible. 30,000 different pieces of information, they get hand transcribed, every single copy that's made. There's bound to be mistakes made in that transcription. The vast majority of those errors, they just happen and they just form a non-virulent virus. But occasionally you'll get a better mutation. Now, in order to go from 6 mutations to over 50 mutations, that's been through many transcriptions. And what we believe is this is a group of individuals, or even a single individual, who's been majorly immunocompromised. Therefore, they've been allowed to form these viral complexes over and over again for a period of about a month in order to get this pure honed Omicron variant. The way of tackling this would not have been vaccinating the world, because actually this individual likely be one of the patients that we're seeing that despite vaccination still comes in with the infection. Actually, it's going to be about equitable healthcare across the board. If we could have given the appropriate antivirals, if we'd have got their AIDS under control, got their immune system functioning, then we wouldn't have been in this position. But then if we're doing that, we're looking at world peace, poverty, and sort out global warming at the same time. And that's the extent of the problems that we are facing that's led to this.
Fantastic, thanks. Any last questions, Emma, Patrick, for David?
No, I think it's a sobering thought.
Yes.
I think David almost gives a suggestion that maybe we should be vaccinating the third world before us, actually, at this rate. Particularly if those vaccines do actually work in immunocompromised individuals, which of course perhaps wouldn't be in this case. But no, it's a sobering thought as we're going into the beginning of our winter. I wonder if it's going to be a long one.
I think the next couple of weeks will be very important, all of us following the news and what updates, what happens next, I think.
And it is really important to say that what we're talking about here is worst case scenario. Even if only 2 or 3 of those antibodies from the antibody soup we get from vaccination work, that's going to be enough to see us through.
Yeah.
And in that case, the standard booster, just to boost those 1 or 2 with that T cell innate immunity, and also the flu jab there, having the flu jab also reduces your risk of catching severe COVID through the T cell response. It's not all doom and gloom. What we need to be very careful of over the next few weeks until we know the scenario is it's back to the old face, space, and washing our hands on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. And, if that's all it's going to take, then it's worth it for a few weeks.
Thanks, David. No, that's been really insightful, really helpful, and let's hope that is just the worst case scenario we're talking about. But because even just over the last few days, we've seen the impact, haven't we, of the fear of what might come. Of course, on Friday, the financial markets were completely spooked, but just to see the mental health impact on our friends and family, what we might have to go through again. So, absolutely, let's hope this is just the very worst case scenario we're talking about. Thanks again for joining us, David. Much appreciated.